Thank you everybody for joining us today. Today we're going to be talking about ACA reporting. See, we have a few people have joined us today. So we are recording the webinar. And as people join, we will send this out to anybody who signed up. Obviously, if they haven't joined yet, they won't know this, but anybody who signed up, we'll get a copy of the recording. So if you do need to leave early or you missed part of it because of whatever reason, that's fine. We do have that recording. We'll also have another version of the same class in 2 weeks, I believe, or 4 weeks. We'll have one in the future. So we will cover this again. But thank you for joining us today for our ACA reporting webinar. And just wanted to make a little disclaimer here. Criterion support, either your support person or an implementation, or if you're one of the partners, we do not provide tax advice. We can tell you how the system works. We can explain some of the things that the IRS codes and so forth that they've published on the website. However, we cannot provide you advice on how to treat your employees for benefits and so forth like that. You'll need to talk with a tax professional, perhaps a consultant, or contact the IRS if you have questions. So let me go ahead and share my browser here. Hopefully you should be able to see this here. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about ACA reporting. So I'm obviously in self-service, but I'm going to just jump over to HR because that's where everything is going to happen in the system here. So go over here to HR. Now I'm looking at my dashboard, but employees and the employer configuration is where everything is going to be happening in your system here. So let's look at this very quickly. So the first thing, of course, is make sure your employee information is correct. So this will apply to things with taxes as well. So W-2s, possibly 941 forms, state forms, things like that, where you want to make sure the employee information is correct. So I'm not obviously going to go through every single employee, but just to give you a high overview of this, you're going to want to make sure things like their name is correct here, their social security number is important on here. So you want to make sure that's there. If, let's say, you're doing an ACA form and you see something is wrong, a name is misspelled, the social security number is wrong, address is wrong, something like that, best bet is to fix it here in demographics or on the address screen and make sure that is correct. So you have that right information. Don't worry, this says Toronto. It doesn't really matter as far as my data is concerned, but you'll want to make sure this information is correct. So when you go to mail something out or the people go to file, that the information matches the records that the state or federal agency has on record there. For ACA purposes, specifically, because it does matter as far as their hire dates, and if people, they left and they came back and rehires, those types of things, you'll want to make sure that these dates are correct here. So that if somebody's coding doesn't show correctly, perhaps you're expecting it to show that they were covered in a certain month or offered coverage or something like that, and you're not seeing that, you will want to make sure that you look at this screen here and look at the hire date. Perhaps the adjusted hire date or something like that is not what you would like it to be. The termination date, if somebody's terminated, is not showing the way you would like. That's something where you would want to double check that information and make sure that it's correct on here so that they are correctly identified for the forms. All right. Another thing to look at here would be the information on the primary position screen, because we do have the type of employee to know if they're part-time or full-time. So you'll want to make sure the information is correct here. If they had a change in mid-year or something like that, that we have that correct information. All right. Furthermore, we have our benefit plans. So in your benefit plans, I don't have any active on this employee. Let's see if I have any inactive. Let me find somebody I think has benefits. I may not have put benefits in for this current year. But here we go. So we do have some benefits. Now it's a little bit older, and that's okay to look at it for this purpose. You can see the benefit plans are on the employee, specifically the medical plans, because those are the ones that are ACA compliant. You know, you're not worried necessarily about life insurance for this purpose, but this information is correct. Obviously, for a couple of ones, one is the person's paying the right amount if they're paying a contribution, or there's an employer contribution. That has nothing to do with ACA as far as their pay stub is concerned, but you'll of course want to make sure that information is correct, but also the effective dates and so forth to make sure that everything is correct when you're saying you offered coverage and things like that. All right, if you do need to put the dependents on your ACA forms, if you're self-insured, you need to show that dependent information. Of course, you're going to want to make sure that the dependent information is correct. So little made up little spouse here. You see my wife as an example. Make sure the name is correct here. The date of birth will matter. If you have dependents that are not a spouse, let's say a child, you want to make sure the date of birth is correct there. So you have that information and the social security. All of that would go on the, I think it's a 1094 or 1095B, the one that has the dependent information on it. So you will want to make sure that information is correct here. You can download this stuff as well, and I'll show you how that can happen. So you'll be able to see that in a spreadsheet format. You don't have to go to each individual screen to see it, but you could download that if you would like to see that. All right, so that's kind of the high level of what you need to do on the employee. On the employer, there's going to be a couple of things you'll want to make sure are correct on your employer. So let me go ahead and go to my employer settings. I did want to mention, I forgot to mention early on, if you do have any questions or comments, we do have a chat function. You can chat, or you can use the Q&A to ask questions, and we'll do our best to answer them. If we don't answer them during today's session, we will definitely follow up to make sure we get that answer to you as quickly as possible. But we'll try to answer them as we can. So going into the employer configuration, just so you can make sure that information is correct here. So I'll go to your employers. And of course, if you have more than one, you need to make sure they're all correct, but I'll just go into one of them. So you'll want to make sure, of course, your company name is right. So that's the name of the group or the single employer. This is correct right there. The national identifier, which also could be known as the FEIN or federal EIN, you'll want to make sure that is correct in there. So you have that there. Now, the work location is where we will get the address that prints on the form. So you'll want to make sure that whatever work location you have as the primary is correct for whatever you're doing. Now, you'll see here as an example, that one is my primary. So I'll want to go to the Richmond one, and that's the address we're going to use on the form. So when I go to my work locations, didn't make any changes there, and I go to Richmond, which HQ in my situation here, I'll want to make sure this address is right. So the street 1, 2, city, state, I know it says province, but state, zip code or postal code. Don't worry about postal code for Canada. This has nothing to do with Canada, but you'll want to make sure this information is right because that goes on there. All right, so that's how that works there. All right, and of course, if you had multiple employers and they had different primary locations, you'll want to double check all of that information. So very important that that information is correct. You obviously can fix it if you misspelled something, you had the wrong address, the wrong FEIN, wrong social, whatever the situation is, you could always fix that information. You don't have to worry about like rerunning payroll for the year or something like that. You're generating forms and it's going to look at the information when the form is generated. So the same thing applies when we get to our W-2s and so forth, is if you notice a misspelling or whatever, you can always fix it and regenerate those forms. So how do we regenerate those forms, or how do we generate them for the first time, is under HR administration. So if you're not already here in your system, maybe you're looking at your employees and fixing everything, you'll need to go to your settings. And under HR administration, you'll see ACA. All right, so you'll see this right here. Now, I have not generated it for this year. And if you've never generated it, you're not going to see anything here, but perhaps you did it last year, the year before, or whatever. You'll see those different years in here, and you could click into them to see what you did in those previous years and then employee counts and so forth. So you can look at that information there. But to generate the one for last year, for 2022, you would hit generate. Now, give it a few seconds. It might take a little bit of time to generate, but you see there, it did generate, and it tells me it did it for 116 employees. All right, so give it a chance. And sometimes it does take a little bit longer, especially if you had, many more than 116. If you had 1,000 employees, it might take longer than it did right there, but give it a chance to do that. And then you'll be able to go into here to see some of the settings. Now, one thing that you'll see on here that is not on the employer or anywhere else is the contact information. So this is the person who's actually going to be on the form as being the contact for the form. So you can put down your information right here. All right, phone number. All right, just like that. I think for Canada, so I'm not too worried about that. I'm just going to clear that out so I can move forward there. These are not required fields as far as our system is concerned. So I can actually leave this screen saved without having the correct information here. And then you'll see the employee counts. So this is looking at for the different months of last year, how many employees you had. Now, mine's a very bland company. We don't terminate or hire people because I just use this for webinars. But you may see obviously different numbers here as your, a company grows and, whatever happens there, you'll see the employee count might change there. All right, now if I do need to fix this and change that number, I can just type in something. So if it didn't show that correctly, I could do that. Same thing here. That may happen if, let's say, you had some information that was wrong and somebody didn't have the right date or something like that. You may go back and fix them and want to update these if you would like. So you could do that in there. You'll see the other months are on here. And then down at the bottom is if you do have multiple employers, you do need to put them down here as far as what is their name and what is their FEIN. Very simple to do that. You simply click add, type in the name, employer A or whatever it is, and then the, I don't remember exactly how many numbers it is, but there we go, just like that, and you would hit update. So very easy to do that. If you put in the wrong information, you'll see a little trash can over here to delete it. And you can add as many as you like into that situation if you want to do it that way. All right, now if you completely trust the system, you can actually just download the forms and you're ready to go. But a lot of people like to review this information in a spreadsheet format. So you could do that by actually clicking this import button. And you'll see here, it says this import will overwrite the current year's values. Now, the thing is, you can actually review it without overwriting anything by hitting this little button right here to download a copy of the forms, basically. It's in a spreadsheet format, and I'll show it to you here in a second. But that's how you download it. So if you would like to review it, and we highly recommend you do review these things before you just print them out. So you want to go ahead and do that, and then it will just download in Excel. Not really thrilling as far as the look there. We don't have like some neat animation, but let me show you what it looks like here. My screen's going to change when I do this. So it will download into your default downloads folder. That could be different from one computer to the next. It's your browser's download folder. I want to make sure people understand that, because that's a question I actually get quite a bit is, where's this download? Well, wherever your downloads go for your normal, anything else you download off the web. It could be your downloads folder. Maybe you save something somewhere else, but look there. Most browsers have the ability to also show downloads, and then you can click a button to have it take you to that folder. But just be aware that it may not be the folder called downloads, because you may have redirected it at some time somewhere else. So you could always go to your download manager in your browser. I could show you where it is in the browser I'm using, so you can kind of see what it looks like, but it's different for different browsers. So here's that spreadsheet that downloads. You can see the 5 different sheets down here. We're going to start off with our employer general information. And this is what I was talking about is pulling the information from the employer setup. And you'll see the EIN, the address, and so forth that's on there. So all of this stuff up to the contact information, I could have had correct in the system. I didn't have it correct in the system. So I can still put it in here and import it. The thing is, if I do that, it does not go back and update the employer. So just be aware that if I fix the address or EIN or anything else in here and I upload it to the forms, all it's doing is updating the forms. All right, it's not going to go back to the employer or the work location, or when I get to this employee stuff, it's not going to go back to the employees and update that. So always just remember that, don't upload it and say, why are all these addresses back to normal? Well, it's because you just uploaded to the forms. All right, there's the contact information, which you saw on the previous screen in the browser, phone number, the title. Here is your certification of eligibility. What method are you using here? So there's the different methods there. I'm not going to, talk about what each of those mean. That's like I mentioned, we're not tax advisors here. So work with your tax professional or your consultant to determine which method you're using. Or if you've been using a method for, gosh, now it's almost been 10 years or more, you may be using the same method every year. Just put an X on whichever one you're doing. So perhaps you use that one, right? So just X like I did right there. You'll see even a little note, mark with an X, the one you want to use. All right. You'll see right here, employer monthly information. These are my employee counts. So I can override these if I need to. Now I could have done that on the previous screen, of course, in the browser, but if I want to make this say 115 and 112 or whatever it was, I can just type those numbers in here just like that and update any of the months that I want to update. Now, again, this is overriding what the forms did. If I were to delete the forms in the system and regenerate it, it's not going to read these numbers unless I import it again. So if I had somebody incorrectly, hire date or they were part-time or something, and I fix that in the employee, I can override it here. But if I delete it, it's going to refresh and go back to the employee data. ALE members. So these are those other employers in your system. You saw how I added one in there. I deleted it, so it's not here, but I can do, just like I did there, employer A and whatever I did, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So just like that, and you can add as many as you like here. All right, so super easy. Now we get into the employee information. And again, here's our employee detail. I'm going to make these columns a little bit bigger. So we've got the employee name, their social, address, city, state, zip. And you can see all that information there. Caveat, this is not going to update the employee data if I update it here. So if I change this to say, it's going to be 123 Main Street on the form, but when I go back to this address record, it's going to be whatever it was before. All right, same thing applies to anything in these columns here. If I've changed his name, I did whatever like that. Now that's going to be the name on the form. All right, so here's the plan start month. So this has to do with when your plans start. Mine start in January. All right, now yours may or may not start in January, depending on whatever the situation is, or somebody possibly started mid-year and their date, their plan start month might be different. So you might see October here or something like that, depending on whatever the situation is for the employee. The same type of thing, we're here with self-insured. So if you are self-insured, I believe, I will wait until I see Connor or Patrick say otherwise, I believe you put an X here if you're self-insured. So that'll indicate that you are self-insured there. Here is the offer of coverage codes. Now, there's a whole slew of these codes. The IRS has them published. I can put a link in the chat that goes to the latest 1094, 1095 form from the IRS. In fact, let me just do that right now. Share this with everybody here. That is the 2022 instructions for 1094C and 1095C. It has all of the codes on page 11. Starting on page 11, actually goes to page 12. So it talks about what is 1A, what is 1E, et cetera. You'll see these different codes are in here. So as an example, 1E, minimal essential coverage provided minimal value to the employee and at least minimal essential coverage to their dependents and spouse. So if that's what the system generated and that's what you're expecting it to generate, then great, you're good to go. If you were expecting some other code or you want to change that code, maybe you don't offer to the dependents, something like that, you could change that to a different code based off of what is in the that form I just sent you, that IRS handbook. So you may change it to a 1B. I don't know. You do what is appropriate for you. Again, we're not going to tell you how to handle your employees, but that's going to be in there. So you could go through and edit these. So if I needed to make this 1B for somebody, I can just type in 1B as an example, copy, and I can paste it all the way across like that. If it was for all 12 months, of course, I can, put that there. Here's an example of somebody who terminated in the middle of the year. Let me just double check that code there. Yeah, so they terminated in the middle of the year. Now you may see other codes here. So when you go over, we have these right here, these other codes that explain why they didn't have coverage in those years. So those are the other codes there that go into I forget which box number that is. I think it's line 16. This is line 14, these codes. So these are the codes that go there. And then if you do have a situation where somebody started mid-year, ended mid-year, didn't have coverage for some of the year, you may have a code in there that says like 2A because they were not covered. And again, that's where you'll want to read the manual. It talks about what those mean. 2A in this particular situation means they were not covered, they were not employed during that month. That's why they weren't offered coverage. Same type of thing could happen when somebody gets hired in the middle of the year. They were hired in March. So 2A for January and February, 2D during that time when they were hired, but they're not eligible for benefits. And then when they're eventually eligible, you put the appropriate code in there. In my situation, it did 2H because I'm using the 4980 affordability method. So that's what that means right there. But your situation may be completely different than what you're seeing here on this. But you can just go through and review these things. Of course, with Excel, you could, lock the top row and the columns and so forth. That's all Excel stuff you could do. But take a look at this and make sure that it's right. If you are using the federal poverty line method and you need to put down the cost of the coverage and stuff like that, you can type those in right here. That's what goes into, I believe it's line 15 on the form, where it has the cost of the plan. So it's the employee contribution, I believe it is, the monthly contribution, to make sure that it actually is affordable. If you put down too much and it's not affordable, I think the IRS is going to have a word with you, but you would put that number down there. All right, if you are self-insured and you need to show your dependent information, here's where it's going to export out that dependent information. So you saw that person with my wife as the spouse's name, and here's the example of that here. That person was covered all year long. There's the social, if I had one, the date of birth, if I had it, would be in here. And it would have all the different dependents that you have in your system there. All right, so I made some changes here to the form in the spreadsheet here. So I obviously want to make save a copy of that. Now, if you would like, of course, you can save your own copy. What I would say is if you are going to upload the spreadsheet, you may want to make a backup copy that you're doing your own work on. I've seen a lot of people do, they're referencing files and they have a spreadsheet open where they're doing a bunch of like formulas and stuff like that. Don't do that in the templates so much. Maybe make a copy of the template if you're going to do a bunch of formulas, and then, keep a fresh copy of the template you're going to upload, just because sometimes if the data is not in the exact correct format, you'll get an error when you go to import it because you didn't put the right code or the formula wasn't right and it put something strange over here, maybe put the word error. So just be careful with that. I always, if I'm getting an error when I import, I always just re-export and then I like copy and paste the values from a sheet, maybe from the one I'm working on. So just a little tip on there, but I'm gonna go ahead and save this now. It's important to save and close because a lot of times Excel will lock the file and you won't be able to upload it. You may get an error when you go to upload it. So let me go back to my browser here and I will go ahead and upload this here. Let me just grab that from my downloads folder. And I'm going to drag and hopefully drag and drop. Let's see there. There we go. So I just did a drag and drop. Of course, I could have done the browse. Now, the default name for this sheet when it exports is ACA.XLSX. You could change that if you want to call it like 2022 ACA or something like that. That's certainly fine. We're not going to, the name itself doesn't matter, but be very careful with the templates that you keep it clean, because I've seen situations myself where I wanted to pull my hair out because the template got messed up and I messed it up myself. So then I would hit import and it's going to go through and hopefully see a message here that says it's been validated and there are no errors. Now, there could certainly be errors. If I put in a social security number that was like not the right format, maybe I was missing some required information like the employee's name and social or something. I put the rest of the information, stuff like that. The nice thing is that we do download a little error spreadsheet that highlights in red if there is a problem. So I'll go ahead and import that. It'll update this information. So whatever I did. All right. So at this point I can save this. Now I'm not like stuck or I can't, I can't get out of there. If I don't do anything, if I don't want to download the forms, I can just leave this here. Maybe I want to look at them over several days. We realize it's going to take some time to sometimes review these things, but when you're ready, you would just hit download forms, and these are going to download a zip file with each form as a separate PDF in the zip. So it may take some time to download. You'll see, I don't know if you can see it on my browser, it's downloading down here in the corner. Each person is going to have a PDF in there. So now while that's downloading, I did want to talk about our other option for ACA filing, which is to use Atrix. Atrix is a paid service that you can use to do these same forms. You can do the editing of the forms and everything in Atrix. I'm not going to go through all the different steps in that, but there is a crucial thing you need to enable to be able to do that. And that is you need to go into, even if you're not using payroll, you need to go into the payroll settings and tell it you would like to use Atrix. So I'll let that, I think I can get out of the screen while it's still downloading. Yes. So if you would like to use Atrix, or at least see it, you can use it without, you can view it on screen without it charging you anything. But when you go to file, that's when you would have to pay. But you can go into your payroll settings here. And this works even if you're using, let's say for payroll, you're not using Atrix for everything else, but you want to use it for ACA. Maybe you're even using Criterion for US, but you want to see what Atrix looks like, at least for the forms. You can change it here, generate the forms, and then change it back to the current method you're doing it. So I've got Atrix here. If you are on Criterion or US client and you change it to Atrix, you can always change it back. All this is doing is enabling a little menu item under payroll reports. Just switch over there. It's still downloading this, as you can see here, but I'll have a new option under payroll reports that was not here before. I might need to refresh. I thought I saved it. It should say government reports. Let me double check that I saved it. There it is. So government reports right here. And like I said, even if you don't do payroll in our system, it's okay. You can still do the ACA forms here. What you would do is you would choose the employer. The form type is going to be federal, and then you'll see 2022, 1094, or 1095, 1094B, and 1095, 1094C. And of course, you want to make sure the year is 2022. And you'll go through these steps here. Now, I don't have my system set up for this because you might have seen it was in Canada. So I'm going to get an error if I try to do this because the ACA is not applying in Canada. But it will go through basically very similar steps to what we did. It will show you your employer information. You'll verify that. You'll then get to a grid where it's going to have all of the employees, very similar to that spreadsheet, where you can go through and edit stuff if you need to. Just like our spreadsheet, if you edit something in Atrix, it does not go back and edit the employee or the employer information. So just be aware of that. If you are interested in using Atrix for this, we'd be happy to help you through that. I don't have time. Even if I had it set up, I don't have time to do it now because it takes a little bit more than 3 minutes, and we only have 3 minutes left today. This download is still happening here, so I'm just going to let it go on there. I know we had some Q&A questions. They look like they were answered in here. But if you do have questions, please feel free to reach out to support or your partner. Let me just go to my next slide here where I talk about this in the last couple of minutes, because that download I thought was going to be a little faster. It's pretty big. Let me go back to my slide. So we'll talk about our upcoming one, but most importantly is our contact information here at the bottom. So you'll see this is to call us directly. Now, within your system, if you're working with a partner, if you click on the help menu, their number and email address should be there. Of course, you probably know who the partner is. You can call them directly, and they should be able to help you through that as well. Did want to talk about upcoming webinars as well while I'm on this screen. We got a couple minutes to go here. So in 2 weeks, yes, 2 weeks, we're going to talk about onboarding. So getting out of tax season, quote unquote. So we're going to get back to our kind of normal schedule of onboarding stuff, which is HR related. We will revisit ACA reporting in about a month. Actually, I think it's exactly a month. And then going over to talking about forms, the end of February, some GL account mapping, so into payroll settings in March, deductions, some payroll stuff in March. We're going to be talking about that. But here's our upcoming schedule. My download is still happening, so I can't show you that, but it is the PDFs. Just real quick at the very end here, thank you for joining us. As you can see, our phone number here at the bottom to contact support. You're always available by sending an email to help@criterionhcm.com. So thank you again for joining us. If your question did not get answered, what's going to happen is we will get back to you. We're going to email you. I know a couple questions came in here right at the last minute from a couple of people. If they don't get answered live here, I may be answering, I'm not sure. We will definitely get back to you through email, or, if it's something that's way more than an email, we'll call you, but it looks like Connor's answering one of them. I'm going to let him answer, but thank you for joining us. If you'd like to leave, I'm just leaving the webinar open so he can answer these questions. But thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again in a couple of weeks.